All right. Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to our first Learning Tech Talks of 2020, where we
Yay.
are, yeah, I know, right? Where we are exploring the landscape of learning technology while cutting through the fluff and getting the questions answered you need answered to build out your digital ecosystem. Today, I'm joined with Micah White from CGS, and we are talking about an interesting topic. We're talking about automation for e-learning. But before we dive into it, it wouldn't be Learning Tech Talks if we didn't kick it off with a fun question, icebreaker teaser question. So
Oh,
we did this before we go. So I don't know the answer yet. I got a glimpse of it, but I didn't get the full one. And that is, what was the most fun thing you did over the holiday break?
all right. So what we did was we got the Millennium Falcon Lego set. It was
Okay.
the biggest set our house has gotten so far, and my son and I, my other son and my daughters, we built the Falcon. So we're huge Star
Cool.
Wars fans, and we just built it. And there was a lot of love with all the pieces and parts. And it's not fully complete yet, but it's very close.
All right, the holiday break's almost over. Is the goal to have it done by the time the break's over?
I think so. It is, and they're
Okay.
heading back to school next. We've got to hurry. We might have to get Chewy involved to fix a few things, but
Okay.
we're real close.
Okay. So two follow-up questions completely unrelated to automation. First of all, one is, are you typically Lego fans or just Star Wars fans and happen to get the Lego version of it?
The household is huge Star Wars fans,
Okay.
except for my wife. She likes it okay. The kids and I are massive, but my children love Lego a lot. So
Okay.
every year they get the sets in, and great toys. Great for creativity, and probably almost all of us. Great experience. So.
Okay. Okay. Got it. And then the other one is that one you can still just buy through the Lego store, or did you have to special order, eBay, something like that?
We went to a local up in Canada. Toys R Us is still there's
Oh,
still
it's still a
Toys R
thing
Us,
up
so
there.
there
Okay.
is, yeah. And
Wow.
we got it there, so
Okay. Okay. So you got it at a traditional toy store, even not
that's it.
not.
That's it. Yeah.
All right. All right. Well, so my son is 8. My oldest is 8, and he's a huge Lego fan. So I spent a lot of time over the break too doing Legos. He's
Oh
into
yeah,
Lego Technic, so he
yeah.
built like a car transporter and this loader thing. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, we're Lego fans here too. All right. Well, so that's enough on that topic. Let's jump into the discussion around automation and e-learning. But before we get to that, what is tell me a little bit more, and I know a little bit about this, but even I don't think I've dug into this with you. What
Sure.
is your background a little bit, and what brought you to kind of the tech side of learning?
Oh, interesting. Okay, so I'm the director of R&D for the Enterprise Learning Division at CGS, and I worked. I've been a system analyst and programmer for close to 25 years, working professionally, and I had worked in an e-learning company right around the millennium. So I was working in a telecom company and working with long distance provisioning, and I worked for the statistics agency and worked on the business register and all these different programming jobs. And when I went into the learning, suddenly there were graphic artists walking around, and there were
Okay.
creative folks, and it was just very interesting. And I went into children's animation for a couple of years in 3D graphics, and I sort of went into a creative graphics programmer role. That brought me back into enterprise learning because obviously we're trying to increase engagement, and the solutions are getting more and more complex, and there's a tremendous creative space within learning, which I think is one of the greatest parts.
Okay. Okay. So you didn't come out thinking, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be in learning and the niche of learning technology, but that's the journey you've been on.
No, like many folks, you got the musicians, and you've got the creative, and then you kind of find the space, right? So
Yeah.
I think it was one of those for
Okay.
sure.
Okay. Well, see, I was actually a math and computer teacher. And then so I actually was a teacher from the beginning. But
Oh,
one of the
fantastic.
things that you mentioned that is interesting, and again, still not on the topic of automation, but you talked about it, that is fascinating about the L&D industry is the diversity of it, right? You
Mhm.
talked about the creative side. You know, you can be in project management, you can be a programmer. It doesn't really matter. There's,
Yeah.
especially as we move into this digital age, it
Yeah.
just continues to be a more and more diverse field. So, okay, so let's talk about this because I've gotten a lot of buzz around what do you mean when you're saying automation and automation for e-learning, where people are hearing some of these terms. I don't think they're hearing it in our industry as much. So
Right.
talk a little bit about what do you mean when you say automation?
Right. So when we talk about RPA or robotic process automation or just automation in general, it's taking what typically like a human being would do with the computer. It could be a repetitive task. It could be a task that has many repetitive parts. So if you're in audio production and the audio files have to be cut as WAV files and they need to be compressed and then they need to be put in a folder up on a OneDrive or a Dropbox or something, and they have to be moved around, and it's all repetitive. And these things need a certain level of skill.
Okay.
It might be low, so you don't have to really think too hard, but it's mechanical. And automation is really coming up with software services to assist and to help with your production,
Okay.
to help speed things up, be able to do more than what a certain number of individuals could do, and to amplify what the learning production is able to do on their own.
Okay.
So it's really interesting.
Well, and it's funny because I think sometimes when you think about this, we think of developing, and the topic of this is using automation for e-learning development
Hmm.
today. That's specifically the top. I think sometimes when you initially think about it, you think of e-learning, you think, well, no, it's creative, it's instructional design,
Yeah.
it's
Oh
not.
yeah.
But there's so much. I mean, I remember back to my e-learning developer days.
Hmm.
So much of it is just tedious, right? You're just
Right.
following steps. Like I'm moving this from here. I'm putting this data in this spot. Like I'm just doing it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So I think that's where, when you think about it as a process, there's no shortage of process that can be automated in e-learning development.
Right. But think about some of the fascinating things like there's a code word in the industry that's a cookie cutter. And
Okay.
that's a bad word. So if you're gunning to be super engaging and creative, that's the term you don't want to hear. It
Yep.
means that it's done by rote, that it's lifted and shifted over, what have you. But one of the things is if your production can use technologies to speed up and to be able to take some of the lift and then also amplify so that you can actually deliver more complex, more engaging simulations and experiences, then it becomes a very creative thing. And that's one thing where the CGS group has really worked to make RPA work, um, to be able to achieve more with the tools that we have and be able to get those greater experiences.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that it's one of the natural resistances to it is this idea that, well, if we have automation doing this, it's going to be, blah blah. You just copy Control
Yes.
C, Control V
Yep.
from this to that, which it can, right? I mean, it could do that, but it can do more than that, correct?
Absolutely. For sure. You have to consider what it is you're trying to accomplish, and then you always have to watch or be on guard. If you're working on something, if you automate, if it's screen creation or test creation or interactivity, and then it's like, how do we drive interactivity in new ways? How do we continually improve things? And it is something. It's sort of it's a fear that we hear kind of often amongst our own creative work unit.
Okay.
It's like we wouldn't want to turn ourselves into let the robots do all the work, and
Yeah.
and then then we're obsolete, or we get dull and all these things. So there is. I mean, it's something to really, it's something to really consider.
Okay. Yeah, I don't, but the point is that some of these tedious tasks we're automating, they're not what's keeping you sharp as a creative. They're not
That's
what's
exactly
making
it.
you, bring to life something that's truly dynamic.
Yes.
We did talk about this though before we came live, and I think it's an important use case, and maybe we can have a little discussion on this before we get into the more creative side. I know I've been tasked with it in the past. I know a lot of organizations are struggling with it. Now we could have a good debate on whether this is a real problem to solve, but a real realistic use case for this is with Flash kind of
Yes.
phasing out.
Yes.
There are no shortage of people scrambling, saying we have loads and loads of stuff in legacy Flash format
Yes.
that we need to move to HTML5.
Yes.
That you mentioned is one use case. Talk a little bit about how this would work. Paint the picture visually, if you will, of how this would apply to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So for many years, Flash, Macromedia, and then Adobe Flash, and it sort of revolutionized the courseware business. And this is over a decade ago. When we saw when the iPhone came out in 2007, and we were kind of like, okay. And then when the iPad came out, we were like, it's probably gonna go.
It's probably gonna go.
It's gonna go. And so the idea there was, lots of so it was a golden age for graphic developers in the UK, especially the stuff that used to come out of the UK and and out of Ireland, the interactivity model, being able to do custom things to teach more effectively in a self-paced digital format. And this stuff, it has legs. Some of it's still being used. We've got courseware that's over a decade old and still being highly utilized. In fact, people ask when that it can be kept and maintained and what have you. So the idea is that the thinking was good, the learning strategy was good, it was well executed, it was really interactive, and the feedback and the metrics that people have is that it taught and it's effective. So what happens when it's no longer available?
Yeah.
The browsers have been locking, sort of ratcheting up the restrictions, and then ultimately now it's over. I think the argument's done that I'd say in every mobile app shop in the world, there's a Flash or a Flex developer formerly, right? And they've migrated into the new. I'm one, and we migrated into new skill sets. Okay, so you've got this interactivity locked up, and you want it back, but how do you get it? So there are a variety of processes that you can work on the Flash content. Now, you might have access to the source projects, but in a lot of cases you don't. So you have these binary little SWF or Swift files. There's a series of them oftentimes, and then the browsers will play them. One by one, they get called up. And the animation and the sound and the video and everything's like locked inside of them.
Yeah,
it's proprietary. So there's decompilation tools out there that are off the shelf. You can buy them, for not a lot of dollars, and what they do is they run through this Adobe's binary format, and they'll rip out
basically decrypting it, right?
Decrypt it, yeah. Pull the assets out, so the text and the pictures and the audio and everything. And then from there, an L&D developer can take that stuff, and maybe they eyeball the old animation, and then they go into a newer generation of tool that supports modern web standards, and then they reauthor the experience. Sometimes they take a video of it. If they go, oh, that's pretty complicated and it's passive, say the user's not interacting with it, we can just take a video of it, and then they show it as video. There's a whole bunch of decisions that can be made, cost effectiveness and what needs to be redeveloped. But it becomes a really big challenge, and it becomes an even bigger challenge when you're at scale. So if you've got a large,
even for one course is one thing. When you've got libraries of courses, it's another.
And you say to yourself, do I fish or cut bait? Do I say this is no longer valid? So maybe some of it just goes away. So there's a pruning process around it. But what we found is we've got people that have connections, and the learning population and the metrics all have a connection to some of this stuff. It needs to be redeveloped. But what do you do when you have a large collection of things, and the scale of it? So one big thing about RPA is helps L&D deal with scale, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But if your problem is complex, it's like, do Do you recruit helpers to come in? Do you tie up your team redeveloping? Do you work with vendors? A group of vendors, and then what about the quality and and everything,
Yep.
the formatting? So that it actually becomes a really complex problem.
Well, and one of the things you hit on there that on this topic, I've seen it come up multiple times because you talked about the fact, you start pruning, you look back at some of this stuff and you go, why do we even still have this?
Hmm.
And I've seen people go on polar opposites ends of the spectrum. You've got some folks that are like, everything needs to be saved and we need to redo everything. That's one extreme. And I've seen the other side where some folks say, hey, it's old, throw it out. Just,
Hmm.
just go ahead and thank it for its time and get rid of it. I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a somewhere in the middle, because the reality is there are sometimes things that you say, hey, we can't just throw this out, or we can't just throw this out now. Maybe we can start to move towards phasing it
Hmm.
out. But the reality is it's meeting a need somewhere, it's accomplishing something, and we can't just pull the cord and say we're done with it. But it's about putting that critical thought into this process versus just saying, we've got an LMS full of thousands of courses, let's throw automation at it and just migrate them all.
Right.
That's not a good use of the tool.
Right, right. I mean, well, exactly. There should be a diagnostic done, especially, like, I guess the technology is sort of, cueing us to have a look at things, right?
Yep.
But that in a healthy organization, you would always be evaluating, metrics wise, what needs to be updated, what's meeting the goal, what isn't. But sometimes, if you're faced with with an extinction date for
Yeah.
flash technology, then you have a look at it and you find out. And using RPA to be able to do some of that process, the decompilation, be able to pull the assets out, be able to put them in a new staging, into a new environment, be able to bring some of the animation over, that can be really useful. It does it in a consistent way. It's usually very budget conscious. So
Okay.
people are worried about budget. What do we have to do? Is this a custom content effort to get all this stuff converted? And if you can set like a software service to assist with a large part of it, there's still a human element, with a lot of RPA type engagements, where there's a sort of a practice bureau behind it that's like making sure that things are just right and what have you. But it can dramatically decrease your costs. So it's bringing the scale of the problem down to something that's manageable. You can get your hands around it. You can
Okay.
say, I want to do this decision, out of these 100 assets we want to save in Flash, we want to save 30 of them or 50 of them. And we want to do it in a very cost-effective way, and we want to do it quickly, and we want to have high quality, right? So it's kind of, you're getting all the pyramid or whatever, but you want to have all these things. That's what the customers want.
Okay. So let's talk about this human in the loop piece of it, because that's one of the natural resistances to automation in general, is this fear that, hey, if we just hand this over to the robots, right, what role do I play? So as a developer or as a learning professional, if you're talking about automation coming into and augmenting what you're doing, what does that role look like? How does that change from, what you've been doing?
Sure. So maybe I'll just talk a little bit about the RPA process, and then
Yeah.
so basically, RPA in a nutshell, what it does is, it takes what a human being would be doing and it learns that behavior. So you actually train the software. The RPA software is a collection of, it's like a buffet, or like the greatest like meal you've ever had. It's got all the best tools
I
kind of
don't
there.
think of Old Country Buffet or buffets as the best, but I get what you're going for.
Okay.
It's
All
the
right.
smorgasbord of
It's the
stuff.
smorgasbord,
There we
exactly.
go.
So you've got intelligent character recognition technology, you've got optical character recognition, you've got screen scraping,
Okay.
you've got the ability to parse and run other programs. So if you're running a decompiler for the Flash example, you can run that on a batch. I think that everybody that even does a little tiny bit of programming, you got somebody in your office who's a whiz with the Excel
Yeah.
spreadsheets, and automation comes in there, and that's the entry point for a lot of people. They
Okay.
figure out oh, I can turn this Excel data and I can turn it into a Word document, or I can write it out to a text file. And then if you're just, even if you're like a junior programmer, you write out a text file, and then you write from I equals 0 to 100, and you write out 100 text files, and then you start to see the power of it. You're like,
Okay.
this, I'm leveraging the system. Anyway, so back to it. The human beings are absolutely there to kind of to check, and with machine computer vision and machine learning, the ability to check, formatting and where things are positioned and everything, if everything looks right. Human beings still do that in general. Although with computer vision, we're starting, like Adobe Sensei is one there that they're making great strides, but
Okay.
they're actually offering services now where you don't need as much. But being able to just make sure that the intent going from one, if you're porting from one format to another, or if you're building, and then just being able to do the final check. And then there's quality assurance, which there's no better quality assurance than a great a human being who's got a checklist and has the experience to know what needs to be done. And the human beings in the RPA process are building the technology as well, like how to understand parsing one format to another, how to program the RPA to actually do its job, and then monitoring it to make sure that the jobs are completing
Okay.
successfully.
So what's interesting about that is years ago, I'd heard there was it was almost a little bit of a running joke in the tech circles that people were eventually going to be managers of machines, right? That
Mm-hmm.
was, and in what you just described there, to some degree, that's what your role becomes. You almost become a manager of, all right, I'm taking my critical thinking, or I know what I want it to do, and I'm empowering the machines to be able to do that, and I'm checking and coaching and guiding them along the way to make sure it's doing it the way I need it to, and it allows me to do it at a much greater scale than if I personally am the only one sitting down doing all these tactical activities.
It forces the human side of the equation to really be thinking of the higher order magnitude of tasks.
Okay.
You can train the robots to, how a Microsoft Word document always has that little yellow ribbon across the
Yeah.
top that says click here to edit. Well, you can train the software so every time it opens up a Word document and starts translating, you can teach it these simple things, and you just don't have to do them anymore yourself. You're not copying pasting anymore. There's a lot of room for human error too if you're doing redundant tasks. And we look at our team, and we know we've got a lot of friends in the industry, and nobody wants to be filling their day with
Spell
low
checking.
skill. Yeah, like I call it low skill, but I just mean like the rudimentary. And
Yeah.
then if you can be involved in a whiteboarding session where you're like, we're going to increase the ROI, and we're going to get this workforce more efficient faster, and we're going to make a really big difference. Those are the types of things. So the design of the overall experience, the elements that are going to be used, the excitement factor, the engagement factor, how information is retained, and the instructional design, like the design team comes in and figures out, and then it's really an amplification so that those types of activities are at the forefront. And then you can get some of the production work or labor or whatever you want to call it. Some of the lower magnitude items can be handled by the software much more effectively, but it still opens you up so that you can really focus on the high value activities. And that's what we do internally. And then we're in our practice, when we bring people in, those are the types of things that we're helping set up as well.
Okay. Okay. So how do you though, right? In theory, I agree. That's ideally that's where we all want to be. I don't know very many people that I've interacted with, or any that come to mind, that have said, you know what I'd really love to do is just menial, tedious robotic tasks. Like that is what just gets me out of bed in the morning. So I think that's
Right.
where a lot of folks want to go with this. How do you, or when you've worked with clients on this, how do you help mitigate that risk though of, okay, because the reality is the e-learning industry has gotten a bit of a bad rap
Mhm.
for, well, we create stuff, but what value is it really adding? What is it really, how do you kind of mitigate that risk so that now you're not just creating massive amounts of non-value add stuff? Is that something that you kind of help people think
Yeah.
through as they go through with it?
Yeah. So in this use case, so imagine that you wanted to use robot process automation to help with your construction
Okay.
of learning, and at a basic level, this problem has been solved by software for quite some time. You could come into a Dreamweaver and sort of access a template and bring in a sort of a templated formatted thing.
Yep.
But in this case, what we want to do is we want to do a couple things. We want to be able, and a lot of times we want to take away some of the tech, or if it's wanted, be able to work and design in the documents and the formats that people are most comfortable with.
Okay.
So if it's like Microsoft Word documents, and then we enable templating so that people can write and they can express themselves in the Word document. Then the software comes and transposes all of that information and content and turns it into the media, and that part's handled by the software agent. What we do is we propose an Imagineering practice, though, of what are we trying to accomplish with this new style of curriculum development.
Okay.
And then what are the most important things? So if it's like ease of access, if it's timely, fresh updates, and then what does that all look like? And then we kind of put that together, and then some of the elements. So you might have really impactful After Effects movies that have sort of a TV broadcast feel to them. So they've got text titles and they've got intros and outros, and then we would set the RPA service up to you could go in if you wanted to create a new version of your fancy Hollywood commercial. Be able to write in the title and the bumpers and the text, and then the RPA could go take that and would actually assemble the movie for you, so that you don't have to tie up a developer by hand. So you get a better consistency. You get a template style or a guideline that's created in advance. Everything is very consistent. And you can actually freshen that content very quickly, and you don't have to have a long chain of labor and production. But being able to overcome the limitations. So when you're working in the popular contemporary software for creating learning material, I think that everybody that works in those tools sort of has visions that they'd like to break outside the box. They'd like to do something that's never been done before. They'd like to, and it's to show, that ROI, show the change, show the improvement. And those tools, they've lowered the barrier of entry.
Yeah.
You don't need to be a comp sci undergrad with 5 years of OpenGL programming to work with them. You fill them out. There's triggers. There's like sort of user friendly, and it can get complicated. But as you try to attack like higher magnitudes of engagement, you start to run into barriers. So Articulate Storyline, it's one of our favorite tool sets. We've been a huge supporter of it for many years.
Okay.
We found that when you're doing simple or medium things, Storyline is phenomenal at doing that. It's very well set up and supported. If you want to do something that's really notable or novel, so we work with a lot of partners, say, look, can you do something that hasn't been seen before? Something that's a lot more complex. Something that's novel, and we go and we look at it and we go and build, and it can become very difficult sometimes, because you've got a tool that's set up to do the simple and the medium things really well, and it's a bit of a limit. And then some of our senior creative folks will say, sometimes I wish we were back in the old school where we just kind of had our custom frameworks and we could do whatever we wanted to do, because this tool, it in a way, it's so amazing, but it might be limiting us at the higher band. So, I've actually got a really cool example here I could show you.
Yeah, no, pull it up.
You?
Pull it up. Let's do that, because I think it'll also help people start to visualize what we're talking about.
Yeah, let me share my screen here.
Let me pull it into the feed.
Can you see that, Christopher?
Yep, we can. Yeah.
Okay, so this was in the telecom space, and essentially this was a customer service rep dialogue, and it was like a case study. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to match the best telecom services to the customer. And this is actually a very complicated, it can be a very complicated process. There's call scripts and there's methodologies to engage, and those are instructed. But essentially, there's a lot of decisioning that needs to happen in order for the call to come out with an amazing NPS score. So what we've got here is a game simulation where you're basically fact-finding and learning about a customer dilemma. And in the middle of the screen, you've got this wheel. It's actually a radial menu that allows you to do and say up to 8 or 9 different things at any point in the interaction. Now, I don't have audio for this.
No, that's
but
fine. I think we can talk through the flow and how
for sure. And you've got it. So the circle is decreasing as you go through it. So you're on a time limit, and
Okay.
you're supposed to click on different areas of this interaction to basically to harvest information, the customer's name, what their problems are, and then what happens. I'll just fast forward it here. As you get through, you've got all these different actions that you can take. Now, this is a state machine done in Storyline. It's not just a click the next button to get to the next scene, or click
Yeah, I was
something,
gonna
get a
say,
true false.
if people looking at it, if you haven't been an e-learning developer, you might look at it and go, "Yeah, okay, yeah, that's nice." What's under the hood on that? That is not just a click and read, hit next, and move
No,
forward.
no,
No, not at all.
because you're assessed as you go, and
Yeah,
it's withholding ultimately the metrics and your performance, and at the end of it, it sort of gives you a diagnostic. And if you can say or do many things at any time and they're all valid, but some of them are more valid than others.
yep.
And the finite state machine done in JavaScript has been attached to this Articulate Storyline project. So this is what we would call this an example of the higher end. Okay, so and as I go through, you can keep playing through it. But what we do is very, very complex to build and took a lot of time and effort, and it was a custom project. But when we let people make updates to it, now I'm sharing them on screen,
Yeah,
they're able to.
can you make that window full window?
Yeah, sure
There you
thing.
go.
I'll try to zoom it maybe. Anyway, you can actually see the writers that actually script these scenarios.
Yeah.
They just give a mood indicator +1, -1, whatever they want, and all the logic kind of flows through the story blocks. Then we
This is
use
the
the
design doc, essentially.
and then we use the RPA to actually parse this entire document and set up all the variable states and conditions so that the simulation works. It's really done to limit the barriers of to remove the barriers of the technology. If the implementation, if it's not the cleanest, again, I don't want to sound like we're disparaging any one tool, but if you're reaching, like, if it's really messy to get that high level of choice and flexibility in a given tool set. If you're then able to abstract all that and let people just write scenarios very easily in a Word document, turn on the RPA process to build out the final product, then you've removed the barrier technology, you've reached that higher level, and you've gotten there in a way that's very consistent. So that's definitely a strength that we see with robot process automation.
So in that last example, just so one that is clear for me and anybody who may be just tuning in now or just catching it, that's like, what on earth are we talking about here? Is a developer or the design team, they're working in that Word design doc and actually authoring out, hey, this is the flow of the call. These are the different possible things. These are the different indicators of all this stuff. So all that critical higher order thinking is still happening on the human side. And
Yes.
then you're tossing it over to the automation that's then looking and basically decrypting, okay, what are the tactical steps in here? So if this many points, if that, this many, and it's breaking all of that down and then
Yes.
translating that into the development tool so that you're not having to sit and custom program all of that in, correct?
Yes, that's a great way to say that. And in the case of Articulate Storyline, there's a trigger mechanism that's
Yep.
used, and you can attach custom scripts to it. But eventually, if you get into a higher order magnitude, problem to solve, something where we've got this finite state machine and hundreds of inputs that are possible, it becomes hard for even the most seasoned storyline guru. So if you're doing a simple, like I said, if you're doing a
Yeah.
simple or doing a medium, go for it. Those are great tools. You want to do something that's kind of outside the conventional, conventional mode. You might need, this sort of software assist actually enables the production to get there, and at the same time, it removes the technical barriers so that people can work in the most natural way that they want to work. Say, I don't want to know, about all the layers and storyline. I don't want to know about, how the screens were stitched together and how the variables all work in the back end. I just want to be able to say, if you do this, the influence is this way, the satisfaction is plus this, or if it's negative, and I want to be able to spell it out and kind of orchestrate it. So
Okay.
we let the designers orchestrate how the gizmo is gonna behave, and then they can see it and test it out right away. It happens very fast. They hit a button and the service goes and processes it, and then they can play it through and see if it's just right.
So you hit on something there that I think actually this whole topic should actually be very comforting for people in our industry who may be a little bit nervous about this whole digital transformation thing, because I know people that have been on my teams in the past, people I've
Yeah.
worked with, one of their biggest resistors to moving into the digital age is almost this, I don't know how to program. I don't know how to
Mm-hmm.
do some of these things. And they may be a phenomenal designer. They may be a great instructional designer and understand, how to break some of this stuff down. They just have not been comfortable developing or actually getting in there. And the idea of moving up the learning curve, of
Yep.
learning the intricacies of this, they just don't have the capacity or the desire. And what we're talking about now is this almost can be that little support guide that's like, look, you don't need to do that. Let the tool handle that piece and
Yes.
focus on that.
It's a shame if someone. I mean, I come from the side of being in software. We don't want our design or creative people to feel beholden to what technology decrees is possible or not possible. We're one team, definitely one team trying to work towards conquering goals and figuring things out. But that said, I mean, I can definitely understand that. And one thing that I would say is the consumerization or monetization of apps on smartphones has driven the customer expectation, the customer being the learner, so the customer being anybody that's going to take any type of training, the commercialization or the quality level of digital experiences is rising higher, higher, and higher. It's driven by, there's a profit motive, so it's driven by either we are the product, if it's like in a maybe a social media or something,
Yeah.
or we're playing apps for entertainment and there's microtransactions, but the experience has been brought to extremely high levels. So people that are are worried about it, the people won't tolerate crummy learning.
Yeah.
They don't want to flip
Tolerance
through.
levels down.
Right. They just, and then there's some anecdotal, I guess, for attention span and but
Yeah.
but it's like, are you going to look at
Let's not go down that path. That one just gets me fired up.
so it's like, if you are about creating engagement, then the software and the services help that process. It's not nullifying that
Yeah.
human desire to do it, much like the movie companies. I mean, we were talking about Star Wars earlier, and think about George Lucas in the 70s, and they figured out production with the cameras and how to motorize them, and the renaissance of science fiction that came from that movie. So, and that technology keeps driving creativity. We've got to, and you don't necessarily need to be a software developer to get in on it. It's something where there's a lot of different angles to go. But again, being able to be able to handle tasks, if it's moving audio around, if it's taking screen content and translating it, putting a different language, if it's figuring out the closed captioning systems for videos,
Yeah.
if it's able to take all the audio out of all the video you have and put it into text so that it can be searchable. So these sorts of things, they start to get pretty interesting. And a lot of RPA practices outside of learning will build compound objects. They'll figure out where are all the things that we can use the software to assist, and they build up these libraries. And so we're telling everybody in L&D, like think about it. What are some repetitive tasks or things that you could, and then what are your limiters? If you had a sort of imagineering meeting where you're like, what's limiting us?
Right.
Why
if we
maybe?
could do anything, what would it
Yeah.
be? And what's preventing us from doing that?
For some, it's like we would like to do more live video with our executive team, or for others, it might be, we haven't really embraced responsive web design as much in our learning practice. We might like to have people on there because phone usage is going up and up and up for learning, and because everybody's on their phones all the time. And it's really like, what are the limiters to that? And then maybe RPA can help with some of that.
Yeah. What I keep kind of smiling, chuckling about a little bit is a comment Nick Shackleton Jones made, which it makes me laugh, but at the same time, I think there's an interesting discussion we could have on this. Is he talked about the fact that he likes the idea of automation being able to scrub this stuff, right, and basically generate like a one-page summary of, hey, you've got all this stuff, here's what really at the end of the day, this is what counts. And he jokes about the irony, the fact that wouldn't it be funny if at the end of this, right, we put all this and we end up with a job aid, which sometimes that might be exactly what needs to happen versus the complexity we sometimes throw into things. But with that, is that, and this is now we're just geeking out a little bit on the potential, but is that where you could combine RPA with machine learning and be able to start saying, hey, okay, we've got all this stuff, let's structure it. Let's let the machines go through and scrub it and see what is all this stuff. And then let's use machine learning to learn from that in terms of, hey, what is the stuff that really truly is impactful to the things that we needed to help us be better at identifying in the sea, in the noise of all the content, what truly is the relevant stuff we need to take forward.
Absolutely. So the RPA software, and again, I'm being agnostic. There's a tool that we use quite often, but there's many in the market. But I mean, typically, this software is invocable. So it exists out on the cloud, or maybe it exists locally in a local instance, like within your firewall on on a server within your organization. So it can be outside or inside, but it's there and it's waiting to run. You can set it on a schedule. You can run it every hour. You can send it a message, I'd like you to run now. We do some printing on demand for some of our partners where the web training format, oddly enough, doesn't lend itself to certain types of printing in certain scenarios. So we actually use an RPA module. When they go to print, it actually goes and dynamically grabs print screens of all the content and formats a PDF and sends it back to the user in real time. This stuff just takes a few seconds to do, and they'll never know what happened in the background. So it's all these new uses of the technology. But yeah, imagine like scoring systems in LMSs or some sort of social credit scoring for learning, and being able to figure out, or what's got the greatest NPS score, or what's been bookmarked and highlighted. So if you've got a highlight ability, what are people highlighting the most, and then being able to pull that and be able to generate that and be able to pull. RPA can monitor like state. So like imagine a website and you wanted to track the stock market over time. So you go onto your favorite stock site, and then the RPA. One thing that's cool, just to geek out on the RPA itself, the reason why it's so, this collection of technology is so interesting is it's smart. It understands like the DOM, or the document model of any web page. It
Yep.
understands the underlying architectures of desktop software. It knows the handles of where the file button is and where the print button is. So if you move it or change it or squish the screen, or if you look
It's
at it
not.
in one browser or not, it's smart enough to know, and it can, it can run. And you can you can scrape data, and you can just continue to store data. So these kinds of tasks are like, it's like that eureka moment when you wrote a text file 10 times with a little script program. It's like multiplied by like a billion, right? It's like, wow. And it's the collection of the technology. If you want to read documents and use OCR on them, or if you want to be able to use the right OCR engine to fit a document that's old versus a newer one, or all these different things, there's a lot of amazing use cases, for the
Yeah.
technology.
Well, and initially when we had this conversation and when we first started talking about it, the application and what we started even this conversation with was right the creation of an e-learning. But really, my goal with this episode and where the conversation's going is to start opening up the possibilities of think about how robotic process automation can allow us to be more effective in L&D. And one of the examples you hit on earlier, I can't tell you how many times there have been instances where I've said, boy, wouldn't it be great if we could scrape, this data set and look for these types of patterns to give us insights into, this type of stuff. But I can't hire a team of people. There's just too much data to sit and go through. But
Yes.
this
Yes.
allows you to do that. And I think you illustrated it earlier with it brings it down to a scale that becomes manageable, where before it was, this is just it's too big, it's too far out there, we don't have the time, the resources to do it. RPA is
That's
actually
right.
making that a
think
possibility.
of the think of the human factors, right? There's sort of like an unspoken bias against the things that are maybe out of our reach. Okay, it's like, I want to get there, I want to do
I
these
want to
things, but
do it, I
I
just
just
can't.
can't get there, and I don't want to admit I can't get there because that's weak, or whatever it is. And it's not. But but when you think about it, what are the limiters? What are the limiters? Why did we not do a responsive web design? We know the users are using a smartphone more often now. It's 2020. And it's like, well, the limiter is, we'd have to redo all the, so if you can use the technology, if you can examine where some of the ceilings are, and everybody's got them, the
Yep.
hottest multimedia developer in the land, everybody's got the ceilings, and you just have to look at it. So it's very interesting.
So when you yeah, we could geek out on this for
Mhm.
much longer than the show is scheduled for. But when you, because now the one risk, or not risk, but I think the consideration is some people watching this, or you start going into these possibilities, it can almost feel overwhelming. Like, holy smokes, that's the thing we just talked about. It just feels so
It's
ethereal.
oblique. Yeah.
I can't even. I don't know where to start.
There's some
When you
master control somewhere, and I
right,
don't
like,
understand
whoa,
where.
I
I'm
don't
not
get
going to
it.
get there.
I'm so therefore I'm just going to avoid it, which I think in our industry has been a big limiter of us moving into the digital age, because it's like
Yeah.
that is so far out there. I'm just not going to do any of
Okay.
it. So when you have clients who may be interested or saying, "Hey, RPA is something we want to explore. We're starting to think of some of the possibilities." How
Yeah.
do you work with them, or what do you
Yeah.
recommend to people to be like, let's not boil the ocean, let's
Yeah.
not automate everything? Where is a natural intro point, kind of that starting point for people to say, let's start with this?
Yeah. Okay, so in our case, we have sort of a business model being created. We have a service bureau. If we're talking with a partner and we say, what are a challenge that you have, and we have a discussion, we find out what problems to solve, and then we might actually create a small robot or a small RPA that just allows a proof point to be had. Um, you know, my documents don't print right, or this system doesn't do, or the manager, some people don't send the thing report on time. They have some sort of problem in their environment. So okay, we're going to do like like a sliver, and we would, we work together and we create it and we show it and we run it, and then in my case, like I work for computer generated solutions. CGS like hosts the robots and the services, but then one big thing is we are really not into vendor lock-in practices. So
Okay.
we allow it like an offloading or an offboarding if people want to work directly with the RPA companies themselves. And in fact, we invite them to do that. We're part of partner networks. We have allegiances with the RPA software providers, and if they go directly at some point, to work. But what we do is we would create this sliver and this little piece of it, and then we would show them. And I'll just turn my screen back on here for a sec. Cool, and I'll show you. This is I'm going to fast forward this quite a little bit here. This is actually, for anybody that's watching in, this is the RPA training process. You've got a desktop application. You've got a flow
You're not
chart run.
sharing anything, just FYI.
Oh, I'm not sharing.
You
Okay.
didn't hit the 3 button thing yet.
Oh my goodness. Oh, you're right. Pardon me.
There we
Sorry
go.
about that, Christopher.
There we go.
Here. Okay. There we go. Okay, so this is it. This is actually the software interface, and we would interview and we would say, what are you trying to do? And we would listen in, and we might, they might share a screen with us, and then our experts who are certified, advanced developers will go and create a little widget or a sequence that actually solves this problem, and then we open it up so that they can, either on a schedule or if it's on demand, or if it's once a day, and then the sequence. So in the sequence, you can see you've got all these cryptic boxes. These are all sort of the programming steps, and anything that you're going to do if you're going to be working with files. So here you see a little snippet of a Word document, confirmation buttons, and this is the automation piece of it. If you are opening up Word documents and harvesting all their content, and then you're putting it into Articulate Rise, which is actually probably a pretty cool example. This is the nuts and bolts of the RPA. We build this, and then we also let people, if they're on the journey to do it themselves. We've worked with partners that have a significant practice already where they're creating their own objects or sequences, right? But if you're just getting started, we would create one of these for you, and then we would have a seminar where we would show you exactly what it's been built and how it's been built. And then we will allow you to see the result. And then people usually make the analysis themselves if they think it's valuable, But it's definitely, there needs to be sort of a hand-in-hand journey for those that maybe haven't gotten involved. As well, these companies that offer RPA software for enterprise, they have academies and they have learning portals, and you can go and get certified yourself if there's someone in your organization or somebody wants to take this on. And there's a big outreach of YouTube videos and just all sorts of training materials out there. You can kind of get a sense of what's going on and how it works just by having an interest. And if some people here that were listening in today just maybe did a search on RPA and had a look at it and did some YouTube, I'd be very pleased, because super powerful and can create real change. So
with that, and we don't have to get into the specifics of it, but sometimes going back to this, because I think, right, that's I'm with you that I think the potential of it is huge. I think it can be almost overwhelmingly huge. And I think that's helpful to think about, where can you start? And this is another question that a lot of times comes up, is starting, a 6-figure dive in, does it have to be a massive financial investment, or is it something that you can start small and say, all right, let's, you talked about that sliver. Is that something that's more manageable? Because not everyone has huge budgets or massive
Yeah.
amounts of resources that they can say, yeah, let's
Yeah.
go do a project on this and just see what happens.
So if you were looking, either, if it's yourself who wants to get involved, you can get the price lists from and it's subscription based. So a lot of the cloud services are now, pay as you go and pay
Yeah.
by your utilization. So you can have a look at that. And if you were looking at a partner, what you'd want to say is, I'd like to do a proof of concept. We might internally call it a sliver, but we want to do something small.
Okay.
That way it keeps the footprint and the overall down, but you get the proof points that you're looking for. And you may have desires to grow it, but you don't have to be locked in at a large expenditure. If we can, if you can provide something simple, but ask for like a proof of concept, or you want to test the water, or you want to do something small. I mean, I know our organization definitely engages on those, and I know there's many more that do too. So I would shop around and definitely maybe use some of that language to get the conversation started.
Okay.
You know, it really is like there's a lot of different ways that organizations can go with it. I would assume that some would want this to be a turnkey that is done for them so that they can focus on their core competencies. And if they're trying to eliminate, some burdens, and they want these competencies just removed, that way they can operate at scale and go faster and accelerate. Others might see a practice within their organization. Oh my goodness, like just look at some of the HR and the finance sector and some of the things there, and the stuff that's going on there is amazing. So there's a lot of places where like maybe things were done, and it's not to disparage any of those sectors, but where things were done a certain way for a long time, and now digital transformation is allowing, again, people to focus on higher order magnitude things, but alleviate some of this low level or repetitive work, and be able to allow it. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's an exciting topic, and some of the comments coming in, I think, are validating what we thought when we first geeked out and said, "Hey, we should talk about this," which is, I hadn't thought about this, or this is a new concept, and I think people understand, or they've heard RPA, but not necessarily really thought through the implications or really understood, okay, what is this? How would I apply that to learning and development or the work I do? And that really is, the goal of this, and the goal of our conversation is to say, hey, don't chase RPA because RPA is a thing. Don't chase it
Right.
because, hey, it's a
Right.
cool new trend, or it's what all the cool kids are doing now. Although it is kind of ironic to me that being a tech nerd now is like cool. I think that's the greatest irony in all things. But right, don't chase it just because it's the thing. But
No.
I think we've highlighted some very critical problems that have limited our industry, that have limited people that have sat in my chair, in your chair, in an e-learning developer's chair, where they've said, I wish I could do more of this, or I wish I could go in this direction, but I can't because I'm limited by XYZ. And that's where automation is unlocking some of these things to say,
Yeah.
well, that's not a problem anymore, because we can automate that and get you out of that mud pit so that you can climb on to the other things.
Absolutely. And for anybody that might be inspired a little bit, and I didn't mention this, the RPA software manufacturers, usually some of them have a community edition or a light edition, or what have you, and it allows people to kind of maybe see it and have a look. And again, just consider what you might be able to do with all the different, and we touched on some of the technology processes lightly, right? But I mean, you'd be able to see it. So it is something I would, from our perspective, like we are a maker of many different types of learning experiences, and we knew that this technology was real, and we knew that it was coming, and we thought that we would get heavily involved in anything that allows us to pass on value or be able to increase our abilities. So it's not the only focus that CGS has for digital transformation, but it's definitely a key. And I think that the more we can get the word out to people in L&D, and it might be very interesting.
Yeah. Well, and one of the comments that came in, that I think is a great summary. And this is a problem that I've seen in the industry. Somebody, Jay mentioned that, right? He's drawing some connections between a lot of what we're hearing in Burson's work and really in our industry, this talk of, well, AI in organizations and AI in HR, which is very vague and ethereal. And that's where it is hard for people who aren't geeking out on this quite as much, or even those of us who are, to sometimes think, well, what does that mean? What does that
Yeah.
actually mean for us? And that's where part of it is. I think one of the biggest steps, and we did this today, is breaking down AI. Because to me, one of my frustrations with AI, that is as wide as the ocean is deep.
Yeah,
There
we
are
feel it.
it's like it doesn't mean anything. And when we start talking about the specifics of, well, this application, I've got an episode coming up later talking about NLP, right? Natural
Mhm.
language processing,
Yeah.
which you can start to get into the specifics of that kind of stuff. And this has been, honestly, this has been phenomenal. I'm glad to see from the comments that people got value out of this, and it's got the wheels turning on that. And I just, we're up at the top of the hour, Micah. So like I said, we could definitely keep going.
Yeah.
But this has been a perfect teaser, and I appreciate you being here. And we get to hang
Yeah.
out again, but that's always fun.
I appreciate it very much. You're
Yeah.
right.
Well,
The hour did go fast.
I told you it would. I told you it would. So thanks everybody for watching. If you want to continue the discussion, feel free to check out the website. I have a Slack community going to foster this conversation, to foster this dialogue, and keep things going. And Micah's here for you. I'm here for you. Thanks for tuning in, and have a great rest of your Friday and a great weekend. Thanks everybody.
All right.